Good morning. I will leave another minute because participants are joining as we speak before we start. I see we have more than 60 people already. 70. And now 74. And I think it's safe to start at this moment, 2 minutes after 10. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar on closing the gender gap in STEM. My name is Cosmin, and I am a NESET expert committee member and also a researcher in education at University Institute of Lisbon. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar organized by the NESET network in collaboration with the European Commission. And I will make just a brief introduction of the NESET network and especially the report that brings us today, because we are discussing this topic in light of a recent NESET report that was requested by the European Commission to the NESET network. So I will share my screen just to walk you very, very quickly through the NESET website. And as you can see here, NESET is the network of experts working on the social dimension of education and training. And NESET is a network formed of more than 60 experts that cover complementary areas of expertise in education and training across all EU member states and beyond. And the main roles of the NESET network is to provide quality advice to the European Commission, to provide research reviews for policymakers, and also mapping experts working on the social dimension of education and training. And just very quickly, in order for you to get to the report that we will be discussing today, you have to click on Analytical reports, and here you will find the latest reports published by NESET, and the report addressing the gender gap in STEM education across educational levels is right here, and it's enough to click on it and you can access the full report or the executive summaries, which are available in English, French, and German. And for the opening of this webinar, I will give the floor to Maria Podlasek-Ziegler from the European Commission for an opening address and also a reflection on how this topic of gender in STEM education has been approached by the European Commission and how this NESET report has been useful for this purpose. And Maria will have 10 minutes. I will just let you know that Maria is a policy officer at the Schools and Multilingualism Unit of DGAC. She joined the European Commission in 2007, and she has been working in the field of education, dealing with EU policies and programs. Her fields of expertise include key competencies for lifelong learning with a special focus on STEM education. Maria, you have 10 minutes.
Yes, good morning. It is also my pleasure to welcome you at this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Closing the gender gap in STEM is not only a question of economic gains when providing more STEM specialists in critical fields to address global challenges. This is also about building more just and equal societies where diverse perspectives are truly valued and are the source of innovation. It is about overcoming discrimination and unbalanced power relations. Highly paid STEM jobs have been traditionally held by advantaged men, whereas female-dominated sectors are often underpaid. And this is not caused by significant differences in academic achievement between genders. Closing the gender gap in STEM is ultimately a question of societal progress and well-being. The NESET report highlights the multifaceted nature of the gender gap in STEM education and careers, which results from the interplay of individual, societal, and institutional factors. Therefore, the answer to the question, what works to close the gender gap in STEM, cannot be simple. There is an ongoing debate among scholars what makes up evidence in education, and especially in educational practice. Education is perceived as a complex system itself, a phenomenon of culture and cultural differences, a delicate and complicated social enterprise. Thus, according to Biesta, what works in a certain context may not work in the future or other contexts. And therefore, the so-called knowledge base for practice is never sufficient. It can only provide us with a hypothesis for problem solving and not certainty. Aspects such as uncertainty, value loading, and plurality of legitimate perspectives should be always considered in developing educational policy and practice. We will try to rise to this challenge with the upcoming EU initiative in STEM education. I'm happy to say that STEM education has been put again high on the EU political agenda. In the political guidelines for the new legislative period of the Commission 2024-29, President von der Leyen announced a STEM education strategic plan. The mission letter for the Executive Vice President, Roxana Mințatu, mentions the STEM education strategic plan as one of the flagship initiatives under the European education area and the Union of Skills initiative. The STEM education strategic plan is indeed an opportunity to address the persistent challenges we face in STEM education. Among those challenges, we can mention, first, students' underachievement and the low level of engagement and participation in STEM. This, particularly among students with lower socioeconomic background, migrant or ethnic minority background, and students with disabilities. Secondly, persistent gender inequalities indeed. Additionally, STEM teacher shortages and the lack of adequate training opportunities for them. Curricula are the sole responsibility of the EU member states. But the STEM education strategic plan provides us with the opportunity to engage stakeholders once again in a dialogue and look for complementary solutions at EU level. The NESET report on addressing the gender gap in STEM education comes very timely. It complements the ongoing research carried out by JRC and Technopolis and taking stock of STEM education in Europe. The NESET report is based on diverse sources, such as academic studies and grey literature, and this is complemented by educational practice analyzed in EU-funded projects. In this way, it captures a broad range of perspectives on gender disparities in STEM. The report has already provided us with the insight that the multifaceted nature of gender aspect requires systemic and systematic responses and be mainstreamed across all actions aiming to improve STEM education in Europe. This includes, among others, quality STEM teacher education, adequate teaching practices, for instance, an integrated STEM and gender-inclusive methods, innovative learning settings, and adequate assessment methods, partnerships and collaboration with stakeholders within and outside schools, particularly with communities and families, equal access to quality STEM education and resources for all students, ongoing monitoring and evaluation. NESET research has also reminded us of the importance of a lifelong learning perspective throughout the educational continuum, including also early stages. It reminded us also of the relevance of a cross-sectoral cooperation. In addition, it prompted the focus on inclusion, creating safe and caring learning environments that truly value diversity while challenging gender stereotypes and cultural biases, which can lead to underachievement and disengagement. This report points out some foundational aspects in STEM education which need to be addressed as well. And this has been also confirmed by the ongoing JRC research. First, the ambiguity in defining evolving STEM concepts. We need precise definitions. What constitutes, for instance, an integrated STEM? This is a precondition to inform curricula, define learning outcomes, and adequately assess them. Secondly, identifying which educational practices are the most effective, and this based on evaluation. Despite the myriad of initiatives and programs we have in STEM education, it seems that they not have been systematically evaluated. Thirdly, evaluating the feasibility of implementing educational practices in current educational settings. This includes, for instance, resource availability, teacher training, curriculum flexibility, institutional support. We hope the upcoming STEM education strategic plan will provide targeted actions to address those issues. We count on your support. Stakeholders' engagement is a proven feature of EU policymaking. For this reason, I'm looking very much forward to the discussion today, which comes also very timely for our policy agenda. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this introduction and for letting us know what the European Commission has been doing and is planning to do in this field, and especially the STEM education strategic plan that you mentioned and its relevance in the framework of the issues identified in the NESET report that you also described. I'm happy to announce that we have almost 120 attendees, so the webinar is definitely focusing on a topic that is considered relevant by many European and national stakeholders. And now we will hear a presentation of the NESET report findings with a focus really on what works in closing the gender gap in STEM, which is really the title of our webinar, and we do not want to put so much pressure on the author of the NESET report to answer this complex question. And for that reason, we will have a moderated discussion with 3 different stakeholders about the same topic. We will engage also with our audience today through the use of a Padlet, and also we will of course have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions throughout the discussions and the presentations, please make sure you write them in the chat, and we will for sure take some of these questions for the Q&A moment that we have envisioned more towards the end of the webinar. So now let's listen to the presentation of the NESET report, which will be done by its first author, Maria Evagorou. And Maria is a professor at the Department of Education at the University of Nicosia in Cyprus, and she is also the founder of the InSTARE Research Center. Her activity focuses on exploring and enhancing young students and pre-service teachers' argumentation skills, especially with socioscientific issues. Her most recent work is also focusing on STEM education with an emphasis on interdisciplinarity and supporting girls in science. Maria has worked as a principal investigator and senior researcher on various EU and local projects, and she served as a member of the editorial board on several science education and STEM education journals, and as a strand coordinator for ESERA. She was recently elected to serve as a board member for the European Science Education Research Association. So, Maria, welcome, and you have 20 minutes for your presentation.
Great, thank you. I hope you can see my screen. You can see, can
yes,
you see my screen?
But
yes.
We see it in the presenter's view, a little bit small. Yes, now it's perfect.
Okay, great. So thank you for the invitation, and special thanks to everybody for attending the meeting today. I will try to briefly present what we did in this report, in this NESET report, and special thanks to Maria for also summarizing part of the report as well. You can scan the QR code if you're interested to go directly on the website and download the report. And I will start by saying that this report was commissioned by the European Union through NESET, and we were asked to examine the factors that contribute to the gender gap in STEM education, particularly focusing on maintaining girls' participation in STEM throughout the different levels of education. So the report's primary focus is on science and mathematics education, given their prominent roles within the curricula of the European Union member states, and also the fact that we don't really have many European countries, maybe none of the European countries have a dedicated integrated STEM curricula. So we focus the report on the combination of mathematics and science. To develop this report, we use data from various sources, including peer-reviewed research, educational practices, and policies related to addressing the gender gap in education. And we searched across pre-primary, primary, and secondary education levels. But let's go to the problem. So the problem, as Cosmin and Maria referred to it before, had to do with gender disparities in STEM and consequently in STEM education as well. So we know that women hold a disproportionately small percentage of STEM-related professions, and this indicates a significant gender gap. We also know that STEM male graduates enter employment at a much higher rate than female graduates. And the more recent trends show that there is a growing number of women working in STEM. However, the representation remains significantly lower in fields like physics and engineering, with more women going into professions related with services in STEM. What I just described as a problem is also called the leaky pipeline phenomenon. So the pipeline begins with girls in primary and secondary education where they have an initial interest in STEM. And then as students progress to higher education, the number of women pursuing STEM degrees declines. And we also know from research that ages between 10 and 12 seem to be critical and related to these declining numbers. And the leak continues to the workforce as well, leading to the problem that was mentioned before. So as part of this report with the co-authors, we focused on 3 questions. The first question was, what are the main factors linked to the gender gap in STEM education, with an emphasis on shaping and maintaining participation in STEM across educational levels? The second one was, what examples of practices are implemented at institutional and policy levels to address the gender gap in STEM education? And the final one, why is the gender gap in STEM education persistent despite the diverse measures and policies implemented? Starting from the literature review, we identified 3 different levels of factors, and we based our work on these factors. The first level was individual factors that had to do with self-efficacy, attitudes, motivations, and identity. The second level had to do with contextual factors that had to do with family influence, cultural norms, societal expectations. And the third one, institutional factors that have to do with curriculum design, teaching practices, and the presence or absence of role models within the educational institutions. So all our work was structured based on these 3 different levels, and we present the findings in the report based on these 3 levels of factors as well. So we followed a 3-step approach. On the first step, we started by conducting a comprehensive review of peer-reviewed publications from the last 10 years. After the initial database, we filtered and selected publications based on specific keywords and inclusion criteria that we had. And then we proceeded with a detailed analysis of the publications that resulted from that final search. On the second step, we reviewed EU-funded STEM education projects that were focusing on gender in order to identify promising practices and to understand how they address the gender gap. And for this process, we reviewed projects listed on Scientix, Cordis, and the Erasmus Plus projects platform. And we identified 40 projects that are directly addressing the gender gap in STEM education. And in the third and final step, we analyzed policy reports and gray papers from 3rd countries, using the same keywords as in the previous steps. And the analysis aimed to identify reasons linked to shaping and maintaining girls' participation in STEM, and to explore why the gender gap in STEM education persists despite the different measures and policies implemented. This is a long report. It was also a long process, and I will try to summarize the findings from the 2 main categories here, from the research review analysis and from the project analysis. And then I will, after finishing with that, I will come with the overall findings from all 3 steps. So from the peer review papers, we found out that most of the published research focuses on individual factors like enjoyment, attitudes, motivation, and self-efficacy. The data comes mostly from large-scale studies such as PISA, TEAMS, and local studies. And most of these studies are quantitative. The emphasis is on secondary education and not on the lower levels of education. And the emphasis is not on what works, but on if it works. So we don't have a lot of information of what works, but we have some quantitative information instead. We also found out from analyzing the published studies that these studies rarely account for contextual or institutional factors. And this is something that is quite different, as you will see in the EU-funded projects. In the EU-funded projects, we have most of the projects under the category institutional factors. And here you can also see the target groups of the projects. You will see that most of these projects are focusing on teachers and teacher training. We have some projects focusing on secondary school students, less projects on primary school students, and then very few on pre-primary and very few on girls only. So what works? I tried here to group the findings in the 3 different levels of factors that we identify under the title of what works. So we found out that self-efficacy, which is belief in one's own ability, seems to be a key predictor of STEM interest and career aspirations, both for girls and for boys. At the same time, though, we have seen that boys generally have higher self-efficacy, even when girls outperform them academically. So even when girls have higher grades, yet the boys seem to have higher self-efficacy. We have also seen from the published studies that self-efficacy decreases over time, both for girls and for boys, in traditional educational settings. And this is alarming. And an open question here is how to increase self-efficacy for all genders, but for girls more specifically. When it comes to the pedagogical approaches, research findings show that pedagogical approaches that integrate STEM and are gender sensitive can help to boost self-efficacy in both boys and girls, and that interventions which include gender neutral lessons aim to improve girls' self-efficacy and interest in STEM. There was also a very important note about the role of non-formal environments here. We have found out that participation in STEM camps and other community building activities improve girls' sense of belonging in STEMs, and consequently their interest in continuing with STEM as well. And an open question here is what are the main characteristics of the non-formal or informal learning environments that support girls, and how to transfer those characteristics to formal education as well to be able to improve girls' career aspirations. Being a part of informal and non-formal activities, though, has an equity issue-related implication, since some people, some girls, have limited access to these non-formal opportunities. And we need to, again, think of the idea on how to incorporate more of these characteristics into formal education to give access to everybody. Some other studies also highlight the discrimination that is faced by women of color in STEM, calling for further support and inclusive practices when it comes to that specific category of women as well. Now going into the societal and cultural factors, from the information that we have explored as part of the NESET report, we identified that the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries like Lithuania and Bulgaria promoted women in STEM through policies encouraging STEM education. And if we also check the outcomes of the international studies in STEM in terms of STEM outcomes, we see that these countries have increased STEM outcomes. So a hypothesis here is that these specific policies have been successful. And these policies included support for women in balancing career and domestic responsibilities with fewer gender stereotypes compared to Western countries. Furthermore, we have found information about some countries like Kazakhstan, for example, that have introduced selective STEM schools for talented students to support STEM education, with positive outcomes coming out of that. When we look into family, we see that science capital, which includes knowledge, social networks, and STEM role models, plays a crucial role in shaping students' STEM aspirations. And students with low science capital are less likely to pursue STEM careers, either girls or boys. Parental awareness of STEM careers and gender gaps positively support students' interest in STEM. So this is an important point here on how to support the parents to be able to support their children consequently. And family role models and encouragement to participate in out-of-school STEM activities also seem to be key factors for fostering STEM interest, particularly in girls. At the institutional level, we have seen that teachers' attitudes, biases, and stereotypes can either positively or negatively affect students' STEM interest. The female role models are also important, as female role models in STEM careers can improve girls' science-related career goals and attitudes. And from policy reports from countries outside the European Union, we have seen that leadership support on school level in implementing STEM initiatives is also important to be able to have a successful implementation across the school unit. So some of the recommendations that we have included in the report is that STEM education, especially related to EU-funded projects, has helped us to develop products, but these products have to do with the development of the teachers, but they're not systematically evaluated. And at the same time, they are not communicated and disseminated across teachers in Europe. And a future suggested focus is to emphasize on experimental designs to explore factors shaping and maintaining student interest in STEM when it comes to these European projects. And then going into self-efficacy, higher self-efficacy correlates with better performance and persistence in STEM, as we have seen. And some of the research gaps we suggest to highlight have to do with investigating how to improve girls' and women's self-efficacy in STEM, looking into what critical pedagogies can support self-efficacy, and how can successful interventions be sustained from primary or even pre-primary to tertiary education. Currently, there are no consistent EU policies or strategies addressing the gender gap in STEM education, so it's really important that we have the EU STEM education strategic planning coming up. This is going to support all the member countries. But we also recommend to promote gender sensitive and gender inclusive and integrated STEM practices, starting from early education as well, as we have seen that this is an area in which we still lack. And also to implement policies that guide families and schools to adopt gender sensitive approaches, providing a more holistic support to the students. You can find the detailed report with more information if you scan the QR code here. And I'm also open to questions at the end of the session. You can also contact me through email if you would like to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for this very well organized and clear presentation summarizing the findings of the report. And you have indeed managed to answer the difficult question of what works in closing the gender gap. And now we can use the opportunity of having here 3 different stakeholders to go further into this discussion and perhaps reflect more upon knowing what works, why is it not working still, and despite so many ongoing initiatives and strategies and even concrete pedagogical practices, the gap is still there. So for this panel discussion, I will take some time to present our panelists because they come from different organizations, and I think it's important to situate a little bit also their contributions in light of their affiliations and projects. So first, we will have Agueda Gras-Velazquez, who is the head of the Science Education Department at the European Schoolnet, also known as EUN. That is a network of more than 30 ministries of education. At EUN, Agueda supervises the coordination of all science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, hence STEM projects, in which the European Schoolnet is involved. Additionally, Agueda oversees the day-to-day management of Scientix, the community for science education in Europe, and also the EUN's Ministries of Education STEM Representatives Working Group. In her more than 16 years of experience at the European Schoolnet, Agueda has been involved in over 70 commission-funded projects and more than 20 private-funded projects. And she has also co-authored several papers in science education research and she has a PhD in astrophysics from Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. Then we will have Beatrice Boots, who is the director of the Dutch STEM platform Talent for Technology. And this platform is the National Knowledge Expertise and Network Center in the field of technological education and the technological labor market. Beatrice is also chair of the EU STEM Coalition, the EU's most important network of national STEM platforms. The main goal of the EU STEM Coalition is to facilitate the sharing of best practices between countries and regions. Activities include annual conferences, thematic working groups, webinars, peer learning activities, and online repositories. In addition, the EU STEM Coalition provides direct support in the development of new initiatives, organizations, and strategies based on existing best practices. And the main supporting instruments are policy briefings, task force meetings, and roundtable discussions. So I believe that for the attendees today that do not know or do not work closely with the EU STEM Coalition, here is very clear information on how you could use this great network. And then we will have Jan Lundell, who is a professor of chemistry at the University of Jyväskylä, which I'm for sure mispronouncing, and he has decades of experience in the development and implementation of education in chemistry and chemistry subject pedagogy, as well as in teacher in-service training. Professor Lundell has extensive experience in academic supervision and quality management. At the same time, he has worked in a variety of teaching and research competence evaluation tasks, and from these to the career and qualification requirements of academic teaching. Professor Lundell is the current director of Luma Center, Central Finland, which is one of the 13 regional centers to support formal, non-formal, and informal STEM education on all levels of education in Finland. He is also chairman of the Luma Advisory Board, comprising the core of the Finnish Luma ecosystem to support children and youth teachers and educators, researchers, and working life representatives with issues in STEM education. So after we have met all our speakers, welcome to the three of you to this webinar, and thank you so much for joining us and for contributing to this discussion. And I will start with a simple question now in light of the NESET report that was just presented and its findings. How do you feel that the findings of this report connect to your work and connect to the different organizations that you represent? And we can start with Agueda. So for the answers, you will have around 3-4 minutes as we discussed.
Thank you very much. So for us, well, first of all, it's very important because it's data that the Ministries of Education need. So it's something that is going to help not only affect, influence the priorities, but also the next actions. So under both the ministries, the network, and Scientix, it means that all the following actions need to take those points into account. And we're talking about the influence, as I like how Maria was saying. So it's not just as individuals, but in terms of organizations, in terms of support that teachers get, and all the activities. It's not an easy answer. So I was thinking that it's not something that's going to be solved tomorrow, but it's research like this that influences the next action and influences what we're going to do differently in the future. I'm going to set it like that to start with.
Thank you so much, Agueda. Beatrice.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I think the report is very interesting and it gives a very overview of what we know so far. So thank you very much for that. I must say, I'm actually happy that the things that are in the report are not new for me. And I also think for many of the other European regions and countries that work on this important matter. I think what is lacking us is that that now that we know what to do, we don't have enough time, enough possibilities to have a sustainable approach. And this is also difficult because there are so many things we have to do. We have to start early. We have to make sure that we address stereotypes. We have to work on role models. We have to do pedagogical things. We have to include parents. We have to make sure that children know what career opportunities. Well, and this is only a few things, but there are so many things to do. And if we, and you can't do everything at once, and everybody is busy. We also have a lack of teachers. So the recommendations are I think, we know about a lot of them, but we have to approach them in a much more sustainable and systemical way so that we have results. And then my final point on this is, if we focus too much on the activities and not on the outcomes, then we will never reach the goals that we want. We did that in the Netherlands. Let me give an example. We already faced women, and we tried to convince them to choose STEM. We had this big media campaign. That was at the time that I was young. The media campaign was very successful because even younger people, but especially my generation, we all know what the theme of this media campaign was. But if we look at the outcome, at the numbers of women choosing STEM, we didn't see any numbers going up. So there was no real focus on the outcome of the approach. And therefore, we thought we were doing a lot, but at the same time, we were not having any results. So focusing on activities is exactly as the report says. We do a lot of activities, but we don't look at it more institutionally, and also do not focus on data and the outcome of what we are doing, then we will never be successful. So I think this is one of the key points also for the next STEM education strategic plan, is to try to look for another possibility, because I think also many people in the call today probably recognize what the recommendations are, but we haven't found the best way to execute them and have real result.
Thank you so much, Beatrice, for this important edition. And I saw that Jan was agreeing with you, nodding while you were talking. So I'm sure he has something to add.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, Luma in Finland is kind of an ecosystem that tries to reach all levels of society, all levels of education, and to make a change. And this report actually highlights all the challenges we are facing in Finland, in Europe, in the world at the moment. And if you haven't looked through the report yet, this is for the followers of webinar, take a look at it, and especially table 1. Because table 1 highlights all the issues that goes with the development, assessment, evaluation of STEM education, or STEM in society in general. So we have the individual levels. So what is our own motive? To know, to learn, to do STEM. There's the contextual level, how the society sees the value of STEM. What are the attitudes, not only families, but also in society. And this is a very big challenge for us. Is actually science regarded something valuable, or it's just a necessity to bring us the next iPhone or other telephone or technical gimmick that we can use? And then there are the institutional factors that have been mentioned here already. And these are important because when we talk about sustainability, that is, if we go beyond short-term projects, we need to have sustainability to incorporate what we learned into the system somehow. And in education, the best way to proceed is teacher education and curricula design. And these are the two factors that can actually change the world. And then what we do as educators, teacher educators, educators in STEM, education administrators, we want to facilitate the best possible outcome of everything we do. So we need to know what works and what doesn't work. And this report pinpoints down the real questions that we need to answer. Whatever we do, wherever we do, with whomever we do it, we need to know what is the outcome. We need to follow up what happens. And for this, the report gives a very good guidelines what to look at. Okay, thank you. I'll stop here for the moment.
Thank you so much, Jan, for the complementary contribution. And now then we can actually start discussing precisely this question that the webinar seeks to answer today. Do we know what works in closing the gender gap? And all the three of you have very different and yet very complementary expertise and represent organizations at both EU and national levels. So I'm sure that you can bring here very different contributions and additions to this discussion. But this is also the moment to invite our 121 webinar attendees to participate. And my colleagues will share a link in the chat with all of you. And with this link, you can access a very simple Padlet where you can input also your answers to this question. And I will share my screen right now so that all of us can see the Padlet and the answers coming in. So the question for the audience is very similar with what I just asked our dear webinar speakers, which is what works in closing the gender gap in STEM according to your knowledge. And now to address this question while we also have a look at the Padlet, I give back the floor to Agueda.
So thank you very much. So in fact, a month and a half ago, well, Beatrice, Jan, and I, we were invited to attend an event in China where we're talking about this topic as well, about women in STEM and ICT. And to prepare for that, I asked the ministries of education, what are the actions that are taking place? What are they doing? What works? What doesn't work? And answering the question about what works, and it's actually connected to one of the comments also in the chat about why are we disconnecting the contextual and the educational and the individual actions? Well, the answer was that basically you cannot. And the thing is, you can do whatever you want in education, but if you don't address society, it's not going to work. So there's a number of actions that are taking place in, for example, in Spain or Luxembourg, where they are going beyond education and they're trying initiatives that connect also with parents, that connect with society. And that's the actions that are going to make a difference. Because whatever you do, and of course we work in formal education, whatever you do in the classroom, if then they go home and they get a different message, then it's not going to work. So it's not only connecting with society, so it's schools connecting with society, but also with non-formal and vocational education and training as well. And in many cases, what the ministries are doing that works better is that they're going beyond women and they're going into inclusivity. Inclusive education means everybody, regardless of gender, and in a way addressing the comment that we have also in the chat, regardless of how you define gender. The point is everybody is able to do everything. And when you stop seeing individuals based on gender or color of the skin that Maria also highlighted in the report or anything, that's what's going to make a difference. And that means any initiatives have to start from that basis, treat everybody as able to do everything.
Thank you so much, Agueda, for this very good point, and actually we can say very influential. Anytime we design an intervention, we have to really start from this what may seem a basic assumption, but we know that for many different reasons it's not really basic and it's difficult to overcome. And now let's keep the same order. Beatrice, if you want to build on that.
I totally agree with what Jan said about that it's very important that teachers are included, and also that we have a lot of work to do there. And let me add another point to this discussion, if I may. I think the role of employers, the labor market, is also very important. I think we can give children, and especially girls, the idea that STEM is something for them by focusing on the self-efficacy and the teachers and the curriculum. But students also look at what is beyond that. And if they see a labor market or employers that are not in favor of part-time work, where they think it's only men and they will not fit in, and that diversity is not embraced, that is not something very welcoming for women, but also for men. That's exactly what Agueda also pointed out, that if you do the right thing, it's important and good for the whole group. So I think we should also address employers and other organizations in the labor market to be active in this and to be aware of this. And that's why we also always point out in the STEM coalition that it's a triple helix approach. We need government, we need education, and we also need companies or the labor market. And we are all responsible. And I think Maria in her presentation also showed that leadership is important. Yeah, leadership in schools is important, but I think leadership in industry is also very important. And we should include this, because if we don't work together, we will not reach our goals. And that is something maybe did not come out that much in this report, but I think there is also enough evidence on this, how important it is. And I saw a question in the chat, somebody saying, do you think the green energy, focusing on that theme, is interesting also for girls? I think for part of the population of students, context of the green energy, for instance, is interesting. Maybe for other students, other contexts are interesting. But involving in the context of all the different sorts of industries that need STEM people, and that is also in the health sector, and that's also in many other sectors, is also very important for many of the students. Maybe not all, but for many of them. So I think, yes, let's involve interesting contexts, especially future contexts. They will develop all the time from now on. And I think that's an important issue as well.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. And while you were talking, the Padlet has been quite populated, so you can also have a look at that, and then we can listen to Jan. And if you want to engage with some of the contributions, either in the chat or in the Padlet, please feel free to do so.
Okay, thank you. I think that Agueda and Beatrice are cleaning the table here, but if I make it short, the key notions are sustainability. It needs to be a long-standing effort, not just the short-time approaches. It needs to be going through as a systemic approach through the whole educational life, but also in the working life. It needs to be inclusive. That's the second concept that we have. We need to keep everyone in the circle. We need to have everyone to understand why it's important, where do we use it, how we use it, and we need to give the equal opportunities. Wherever one lives, wherever one works, it needs to be equal inclusion opportunities, whatever the type of educational approach we have. And the third one is relevance that I would add here. Beatrice was talking about the working life relevance, but also in the educational context, it needs to be relevant. We see girls going into medicine because they see that as a relevant thing. They don't consider as a STEM subject, but it involves STEM in a major fraction. So we see chemistry and biology attracting women, girls and women, because they see the relevance in their own life or in the society for that. But they can't get that idea from physics or engineering. However, STEM as it is, it's not gender biased from the beginning. If we talk about electrons, or if we talk about bridges, or whatever it's going into the STEM, it's not gender biased. It's about man-made, or should I say men-made bias that actually affects things. And there we have the inclusion, but we need to have the relevance of why we study, what it means for me, what it means for society. What can I do with that thing that I study? So sustainability, inclusion, relevance. And then what we see in teacher education is that the teachers need to have their own experience of things. The same goes with the families that Agueda was mentioning. When the families are participating with the children in different activities with STEM, they will have a common ground to understand what is going on. They have the common experiences. And the fourth thing is really experiencing things on your own. And that gives meaningful education in STEM or meaningful attitudes towards STEM. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. And I was looking at the Padlet that is now increasingly more and more dynamic. So thank you also participants for that. And I see that some of the notions written here are also consistent with some of the questions in the chat. So there is this point here from Attentive Crocodile, very interesting name on Padlet. Designing curricula that encourage gender equity in STEM education is critical to dismantling stereotypes, and also some points here in the Padlet, not only on the curricula, but also on the pedagogical practices, and of course on the teacher training dimension that you also mentioned. So we can say that with everything that we have been discussing today, that we know what works in this field. Now the challenge is, as Beatrice was mentioning, is to implement what we already know and to make sure that we evaluate the impact of our initiatives. So not the activities as such, as you were saying, Beatrice, but their outcomes. So now let's move precisely to this very important question and discuss what is still missing in terms of knowledge and especially implementation. What are we missing at the moment when it comes to closing this gender gap? Do we need something new to know, like a new study? Is there something that we miss in terms of knowledge, or it's really about implementation? And if that's the case, what we need to do there? And for this question, we have a second Padlet that my colleagues will place the direct link into the chat. So we will follow the same methodology while our speakers discuss this question. Participants can provide their input. And the question that we are asking you in particular is, what are the biggest obstacles to implementing the ideas of the report in your community, in your country? If you are a national or regional state actor in your own organizations, regions, or countries, if you are a practitioner in your school, learning center, or the organization that you represent. So let's move then to this discussion regarding the what we are still missing in terms of knowledge and implementation. And I think now I will give first the floor to Beatrice, since she was the first one to point out this issue.
Yes, yes, that is a difficult question, because now that we know what to do, how are we going to do it? First of all, if you don't do the good things right, then it's not going to work. So first of all, do the good things and do them well is very important to do. What we see in the Netherlands, let me give some examples of the Netherlands. We see in the Netherlands that teachers in primary educations, the girls maybe do not have enough self-efficacy, but for the teachers in primary education, it's the same. They usually did not have any science education when they were in their training to become a teacher, and giving those lessons, they are very insecure about this. So professionalizing our teachers for primary schools is very important, but also, of course, a big task, because we have a few 100,000 primary teachers. And then teachers, as we all know, are loaded with work. We do not have enough teachers. So one of the obstacles is that we don't have the good workforce in the schools for this. So that is not something you do overnight. Yesterday, our ministers of education just announced a big STEM plan for the Netherlands, and they are going to invest 350 million euros in the next 8 years for all primary and all secondary schools. So all schools are invited to participate, because we want it to be an equal opportunity for all. And we do this through regional regional networks of primary and secondary schools. And the non-formal sector are especially asked to be involved in these programs. So we want to bring all the things our science centers are doing, but also our libraries who do a lot on STEM in their locations, and they're close to schools. They are asked to be involved, because then we also have more labor force to help the schools to reach this. So, and we take 8 years for this, and we also work on the curriculum on the same time. So I hope if we talk again in a few more years, I can say how we are advancing in this. But I think it will ask for a very, I think this was also mentioned by Jan, it should be really a long-term approach. It should be consistent and not come with something new again. 15 years ago, we also started a big project. We went from, at secondary schools, we first had 30% of the students choosing STEM as their major. It's now over 60%. And we have as many girls as boys at our secondary schools choosing STEM at the moment. But after secondary schools, 30%, so half of the students then do not choose a STEM study when they advance. So there is a lot to gain there. So for those students, we need something else. So I think we have to look very well at the numbers. I mentioned that in the first part. Look at where is the pipeline leaking. What do you do on each part of that pipeline? So in primary education, it's teachers. I think if you enthusiast them, and we already have experiences now that if we do help them to professionalize on STEM, they actually do like it. And they thought it was scary and they wouldn't be happy to do it, but they see the reaction of the children that they really like it, and they are a lot more interested in that as well. And so I think be consistent, don't come up with something new every year. Our Dutch government is very good at that as well. We have to do more gymnastics, you have to do more music, but you can't do everything. So this is again about leadership. If you think this is important, make it one of your top priorities, invest in it, support it, do it long term, and I think the results will follow them.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Now, Jan, if you want to build on that.
Yes, thank you. What I would say here is that there are a lot of information. We see this in the report already. There's a lot of knowledge. What needs to be done, what can be done, what has been done in different projects up to now. What we need to do is to be clever. And we need to use the information we have already and to apply it in a way that makes sense for STEM education. And what I mean by sense is that let's take it to the practice. We have a lot of information from different projects within EU that things have been developed. Things have been prepared and tested and piloted somewhere. But that information just disappears somewhere in the digital world. What we need to do is to take the good practices that we see that work and to extend them to different contexts, to different needs. There was a comment on the Padlet that there are regional differences. Yes, but there's also learner differences. And what we've seen I'm picking up one example. Very often we have extracurricular activities that are directed for girls. There is the HK Unicorn Squad in Estonia. There is the Girl Tech Fest in Norway. We had in Finland the ZAU virtual science camps. And in all of these, we see that girls are getting interested about the topic when they have their own experience, and they can do that in their own little groups. But what we need to do is to take that one step further or two steps further. So, for example, when we saw in Finland the ZAU virtual camps that they worked, they were motivating, we build up their self-esteem. What we can do is to include those teachings we have from the camps into teacher education and integrate the teacher education into these camps. Then the next step is to take the ideas that we presented and train the teachers with into the schools. They have their own camps embedded into their own classes. And if they need the support, yes, Luma Center is there to give a helping hand. Let's do this together once or twice, then you're fluent in doing it. Which means that we are combining the training of the girls, getting them to have an interest in STEM, but we are training the teachers at the same time. We are changing the practices in the school, and all with the same benefit. We are increasing the participatory actions in STEM. So we have to be clever. We have to use the resources we have in a clever way. And we just need to be co-creative, because we need the teachers to create with us. We need the research to know what is working, and we need imagination or creativity in order to implement it in a new way, in a new surrounding, in a new setting. Sounds simple, but this can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And now heading to Agueda to address the same question and build on what the colleagues have previously said. And also, I think it would be interesting, Agueda, if you could engage with this Padlet a note here on the cultural context and the big differences between the regions, because this is also connected with the question on the chat about how contextual and institutional factors interact and are not necessarily separate. That was asked during Maria's presentation, and I think Maria responded that indeed they are not separate, but for the sake of organizing in the report they are presented as such, but they are very much intertwined. So how do we deal with these different levels, with the individual, with the institutional, with the contextual, with the cultural, with all this diversity when we are trying to implement the solutions that Beatrice and Jan mentioned?
So I would say there's 3 areas or 3 points, and it's both missing and the next steps. The first one, it has to do with what Beatrice was saying about long-term commitment or long-term actions, and what Jan was saying about research. It's not just one thing. It has to be a long-term actions with always a very clear research on the impact of those actions. So that would be step 1. Now, connected to that, to this step 1, Jan mentioned the fact that there's all this research, all these actions, and yes, and for example, Scientix does that, collects all the information, and it's there. What's missing always is the next step. When a new person, a new project, and this goes to Maria for that, so on the commission, is when a new project comes, it goes, cool, what would you like to do? And it kind of comes from, let's start again. While there's less recommendations of these things have worked, can you take it further? So don't, simple terms, don't create a new website, don't create a new logo, don't create a new idea. Grab what works, expand it, even if it was not yours, the original idea, because that's always quite tough. We're different organizations. It's like, you know what? Luma Center is doing something great. Can UN or European Schoolnet go and do something from that? Can the STEM Coalition learn from European Schoolnet? Can Luma Center take something from the STEM Coalition, the platform beta technique? So grab what works and expand it, always backed up with research. Now, the second thing is, and it's mentioned also in the chat, the curricular design. But that if it stops there, it makes no difference.
Agueda, there was a cut when you said curricular design, so if you can come back.
So there is the curricular design, there is the government or changing, saying, oh, we should address this or that. But if it only stays at that level and it doesn't go into what happens in the teacher training, like Jan was saying, if it doesn't change in the people's attitude, if it doesn't change on what people say on TV, then it's not going to have an effect. It has to be connected. Now, those 2 points then connect to the third one that Jan also referred to it in a way. And it's about what's the solution overall next step? And it is integrated STEM teaching and learning. It's about making sure that every single subject is connected, everything is contextualized, everything is connected to society. The classroom, and Beatrice was saying it as well, is about connecting with industries, connecting with the government, it's connecting with the neighborhood around it, is connecting to the science museum. It means everything is not just in the four walls, it's connected to everything. And only through an integrated STEM teaching and learning approach that goes beyond the classroom, that goes and connects with society, we will have a, well, basically integrated STEM teaching and learning is not gender biased. It's inclusive by definition, and it's open to everybody. So only that way we will be able to achieve it.
Thank you so much, Agueda. I think you summarized really well what has to be done when it comes to all these different elements. And now we have some time for questions and answers from the audience. I have been noticing that there are not that many questions in the chat, but I think we can pick up some of the elements from the Padlets, which are also very interesting, and discuss them together. So there was a comment in the chat about a project that produced a curriculum and a training course that was accredited by the Ministry of Education, and it is used to train teachers. And this course also contains a survey at the beginning for discovering participant stereotypes, and then allocate the needed materials according to the percentage of stereotypes. So I'm thinking that perhaps this type of product, of initiative, as Agueda was mentioning, it is not enough to produce it, but then you have to really follow up on it and research and see if it has an impact, if it's being used in the context for which it was designed, and then how it can be further expanded. So I think this is one example among many about how we can take this knowledge and these resources further, rather than rediscovering the basics all the time. And this is indeed an issue that many funded projects suffer from, also thanks to their duration and the funding models. So this is a note here for all the stakeholders attending the webinar that can have an impact on funding initiatives in this area. And this issue of different levels, contextual, cultural, institutional factors, I believe we already addressed it, but I noticed here very concrete question on the role models, that they are very important. However, how we can, this very first comment, that role models are important for girls, but how do we do, what is the best method? We use talks, videos, internship courses, and perhaps this is also connected to the scale. Like we can have one initiative or two initiatives every year in a school, but then we know that's not enough to really pass on the message and make it more visible that certain professions, as Agueda and all speakers were saying, they are actually for everybody. We keep seeing, unfortunately, through the media, through the social media, and in many places, these stereotypes being reproduced. So one or two isolated role model initiatives are really not enough. So how do we do when it comes to role modeling? What is, in your experience, the best approach, and how we ensure that the scale of this role modeling display is really efficient? Beatrice, I see you have unmuted, so go ahead.
Yes, I saw that question as well, and it's exactly right. And now you know what to do, then how are you going to do it? And what is the method that really works? I think the methods mentioned, talks, videos, internship courses, there are all possibilities. The only thing is you should prepare it well. It should not be a standalone activity and do nothing with it afterwards. If you do not integrate it into in your school, your curriculum, or there's no follow-up with good questions of the teacher, it's not that effective. There was just quite recent research. It was done by the University of Twente in the Netherlands, but it was a European project. I think they just finished, and this month they will have a short version of the outcomes of their research. I'm happy to share it later on if I have it. But there, they exactly study this. How can you be effective? And if there's no follow-up in the school, it will not be effective. So it's important to have a good teacher training here. And I think, and we can start integrated in the current teacher training. And I don't think we do that enough. And what I also often hear from schools is they find it it's very time consuming to arrange this and to get the right people or to go to a place, and they don't have the time for it. But if you have a good ecosystem in your region with science museums, with companies or whoever, then it will not take that much. It takes a lot of time to organize your ecosystem, and once it's there, it's a lot more easy, and then you'll find you can sort of combine it in your day-to-day work. And what some schools in the Netherlands also do is they have parent networks. We ask parents in the Netherlands to look after each holiday. Mostly the mothers come to school to look for fleas in children's hair, and they come reading in the school, but they never are asked, do you have a technical job? And can you say something about that in the school? And so that is very close by. There are, if you ask around, there are enough parents who are active in the STEM field or job, and ask them to say something about that instead of asking parents to help with Christmas or to go on a trip somewhere. And we now have actually a few of those parent networks in school, and it's it's a small example, but it's relatively easy to start this. And sometimes how you get started is not that difficult, but try to get a sustainable network or ecosystem, so it makes your life a lot easier in the school.
Thank you, Beatrice. Would any of the speakers would like to build on that, Jan?
Yes. Just to answer shortly, the question is that there is no one particular solution to do. There are many possibilities how to do that. And I posted the link for the HK Unicorn link for the Estonia, which actually answers one of the questions, how you do this outside the school network. Yes, this unicorn was actually established by a very active father of a girl to get everything running. So anyone can do this. This is about creativity. And when we talk about role models, there is a paper, by the way, in the chat as well, that refers to literature review. But this is also a thing that needs to be considered on different levels of education. And we talk now about school and teacher education. Yes, but if we look at the university level education or vocational level education, so we need to maybe use different approaches. There are mentoring systems in Europe that actually works. And there are examples in Germany of mentoring, and that is really effective. There are possibilities of using university alumni to introduce the working life into for the students at university. There's an example in central Finland where the local chemical society actually arranges once a month meetings, which are also in a hybrid model. So anyone can follow the lectures that they gave when they are talking, how they do their work, what is involved in their work. So again, I'm coming back to creativity. There are a lot of opportunities, and I don't think that there is something that needs to be given as a ready-made model. The question is, what can you do in order to promote STEM? And anyone can take that initiative. Parents, schools, teachers, university teachers, administrators, maybe the mayor of the city wants to have a little bit of a STEM in schools and gives an initiative for that. So I think this is an open field. There is not a method that solves all the problems, but there are a lot of initiatives that gives you ideas how to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Agueda?
So I'll start from where Jan said, so about this, that it doesn't have to be in schools. Communities can organize it, or nonprofits can work on it, because it's not only about teaching kids. It goes beyond that. And we've mentioned several times the thing about contextualizing is about society, but actually turn it around. Contextualizing is also about looking at what the STEM subjects or areas in the world are, and how do they make a difference to life. For example, everybody knows if you look at medicine, oh, medicine is important because of course you're healthier. If I tell you, why is particle physics interesting? And then the kid will go, I don't know. So contextualizing means also showing why does that make a difference to every person's lives and every person's action. So it goes a lot there in that direction as well. Finally, I will address, there's a question there about industry's involvement, and I know Beatrice will have more to say there. But the thing is, the collaboration is already there. It's not a new thing. Education has been working with industry for a very long time, and it's about role models, it's about examples, it's about opening the doors in both directions. And so it's not about selling whatever the industry is doing. It's about showing that what we do now, what we learn, what we study in the schools, is going to have an impact later on, because you're going to go into industry. Industry is going to have an impact back on society, on how we work. So that means resources, collaboration in terms of people, talking to people. It means, basically creating projects together. And I would say Beatrice might want to add something there.
Yeah, well, companies is a very broad container word. We also do a lot of things with semi-governmental organizations, like all the water organizations in the Netherlands also do a lot of STEM issues, of course, and also in the health sector we have a lot of STEM issues. Our own government actually is the largest employer if it comes to people in IT jobs, because it's very important for the Dutch government. So it's not only like companies we can all think of, like ASML in the Netherlands, for instance. They do a lot, but in their whole chain of other companies, most companies in the Netherlands, and I guess in whole of Europe, are SMEs. So those companies cannot do a lot all the time, but they can do little things. And especially if you have a connection to the region and to the schools, they are always willing to help. But I realized in the past in the Netherlands, when we started working a lot with companies and schools to give the context to STEM, we had a lot of questions in Parliament. I think if we now would stop with it, we would have questions again, like, why are those companies not doing anything? So I think we changed the idea about it. I think companies is has different sides of it. But what we get back from most students is they find it very interesting that they can get a context is, why do I have to do math? Why am I doing physics, etc. So if they can relate this to a company or to a sector or to a field of work, that really helps them to realize if that is something they picture themselves working in the future. We in the Netherlands have also a concept, we call it the 7 worlds of technology. And we combine technology to worlds like tourism, like the financial world, to how do you call them? Well, all kinds of different worlds. You don't really think of STEM, but those sectors need STEM people, and then a lot of that has been used now in curriculum approaches and in events, and a lot of people really like it. And those words are changing. We developed this before 2010. At the time, we didn't have an iPhone. We didn't have tablets. We didn't have AI. So you can also see how the world of STEM is evolving and developing. And that is also nice to show that this is something you can help shape the future. And that is something children really like. And if you address them in a different way, except of this is math and you have to do it, and oh, by the way, if you find it difficult, too bad, you have to do it anyway. Well, look at different approaches to support teachers, but also our young people to be interested in this. And I think we have to look at it also it's another way. You can call it creativity, we can call it different, but it's more than just doing STEM subjects at school.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Beatrice. And I think this is, yes, Jan, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to add here one thing. When we see something about STEM, so science, technology, in media, it's always something negative. And that affects our thinking as a society. So if we hear the word chemistry, it's something that pollutes, it's something that destroys, instead of having a possibility to do something better, more efficient, more clean, and so on. So this positive attitude of science is missing, that actually changes the way we think about things. And that is something that needs to be also changed by good examples. What is happening? Someone mentioned green energy earlier. If it's interesting, well, we all take a look at our electricity bill and we start to wonder why it's so high. Well, maybe STEM would be able to give us a solution that decreases that electricity bill with the way of generating clean and cheap energy. So it's a way of thinking that we have in a society that considers that STEM is something cold, distant, and dangerous, which is not the true. The fact is that STEM is the only possibility to survive on Earth in the upcoming decades or centuries. So it's the only possibility that we have. And if you study STEM, you actually can make a difference in the world.
Thank you, Jan, for this important addition. And I see that Agueda has an additional comment. If you make it in 1 minute, Agueda, go ahead.
30 seconds. I'll just add that STEM is not only needed and important and the solution, but it's actually great fun. Just say that.
Thank you, Agueda. So yes, indeed, this is a very, very important discussion now that we are approaching also the issue of pupil and student and young people motivation, and how to increase their curiosity, their interest, how to make them, you know, fall in love and become fascinated with this area. And it's not very difficult because STEM is so diverse and so important in our lives, as all of you have been saying. But it feels that for some reason we are having again issue inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and perhaps this societal vision that is less positive. There were some comments also on the Padlet and in the chat on the teacher training dimension. I think it would have been interesting to build on that, but we only have 2 minutes left, so we leave it for a future event, future webinar, or potentially a future report, because a comment was that the current situation in teacher education programs perhaps is not very well understood. So in some countries, I'm sure that there were studies conducted on this and how well teachers are trained when it comes to STEM subjects, and of course when it comes to gender stereotyping as well, but also this element that you have brought at the end of the webinar on how to motivate students, how to make them curious about these topics, and the extent to which this is included in teacher training programs or not, would be an interesting webinar, or perhaps an interesting report. So now for the very, very final closing note, if Maria Podlasek-Ziegler would have any comment, or Maria Evagorou as the author of the report, I can give each one of you 30 seconds for the final remark. You are muted, Maria.
So thank you so much for this discussion. I took notes all the time, and of course everything is noticed and everything is taking into account what we hear from you. To be honest, I liked very much one attribute in the STEM education plan. It is the word strategic. It is not that we need to start from scratch and do something completely new. Indeed, we need to think strategically and to really be smart, as Jan said, and address in a targeted way these gaps, these things which doesn't work properly, and having in mind a very comprehensive and consistent and long-term and sustainable outlook on things. This is my takes away.
Thank you so much, Maria, and the other Maria.
Thank you very much as well. I would like to add another word and close with that. I would like to add the word systemic. It's a systemic issue in my perspective, and it's something that it's in relation to teachers, policymakers, students, and everybody's involved. We shouldn't let that problem on the teachers to solve on themselves. They have a lot on their hands already. So I'm looking forward to the next initiatives of the European Union on STEM education to see how we're going to address the issues that we have discussed today in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of you. I think it's time to say goodbye. So thank you for all the contributions also on the Padlet from the attendees, for being so engaged in this conversation. I think there were many ideas being shared. And we certainly have material for future discussions if we rewatch the recording of the webinar. And this recording will be indeed available on the NESET website. We will inform also the attendees, and you can disseminate also within your networks. If you found the webinar interesting, for the colleagues who are not able to attend today, there is always this possibility to watch it later. So thank you again to all of you, and I wish you a great day.